Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about developing your story ideas because very few writers can just sit down and write a story from start to finish. And there is nothing, and as a writer, there's nothing more terrifying than facing a blank page. And so, before you can even start typing your story, you have to answer a crucial question. What should I write about? Sometimes some of you probably already have ideas that you are waiting to write about. And other you are, don't have an idea. And to start figuring out what to write about, stop staring at a blank page. And we're going to do something that is called pre-writing. And that is developing your story idea. Don't confuse this for actually writing your story because you're not doing that yet. You are just coming up with ideas and kind of creating an outline. Okay? And so this will help you figure out what shape your story is going to get. Okay? So, on the screen now are going to be some idea generators. So, what I want you to do with this video, I want you to pause the video when a new one comes up, and I want you to write about it, okay? These are not quick one sentence responses. Actually, think about it. I think last time when we did create a nonfiction, I could easily tell like the ones who tried on it versus the ones who didn't. And the ones who tried on it had a easier time coming up with their idea and actually writing it. So think critically and respond accordingly, okay? So I'm just gonna put each one up on the screen for about 5 or 6 seconds, and then I'll keep moving on, okay? All right. So hopefully you got through all those. And chances are some of those questions you could write easier about than you could other questions. And so take some time to think about these responses while we cover the following thing. We're going to cover conflict today. Okay? And so, conflict. Once you have your idea, you need to figure out what your conflict is because if your story doesn't have a conflict, then it's not really a story. Conflict, a definition could be the opposition of people or forces against one another. And once again, it's essential because it'll spawn your story's central problem and provide obstacles for your character or characters to overcome. And when we're talking about when we talk about conflicts, there's two different types. There's external conflicts and internal conflicts. And external conflicts are conflicts outside of the body. So the first one here is character versus character, and that's probably the most common one that you normally encounter. So an example would be Hector and his best friend James are both trying for first prize in the school talent show. So it's Hector versus James. That is our conflict. And so maybe throughout the story, he does something to sabotage James, and so James counteracts and tries to sabotage Hector, and they're going back and forth, and then finally it's the day of the talent show, and they're both you know one's got a broken leg and one, is on, and it's in a coma, and so neither win. Or they realize that they need to come together to defeat someone else, like the school bully or something like that. I don't know. So that is character versus character. Okay. The next one is character versus environment. A lot of the nature books are kind of this way. A lot of the Jack London, Call of the Wild, all those kind of stories are character versus environment. So the example here is Miguel gets caught in the blizzard and must find ways to stay warm until help arrives. And so it's Miguel versus the blizzard. So that's nature. And so maybe he's got to kill a horse or something. I don't know. And then the last one is character versus situation. This one can also be called character versus society. And so an example would be Cynthia battles City Hall to start a meal delivery service for seniors in her community. If you read any like utopian or dystopian kind of book, like The Hunger Games or something like that, those are all kind of character versus. I mean, it's character versus character as well, but a lot of it is also character versus situation or character versus society. And when they're trying to take over, that's kind of that's them defeating the society. Internal conflict is inside the character, and there's really only kind of one version of this. It's character versus himself or herself, and it's a struggle between like conflicting ideas and feelings within a character. So, for example, David wants to take Tasha to the dance, but he has already committed to babysitting that night. So it's kind of what does David do kind of a thing. I know these are kind of corny, lame-ish examples, but they work. And so David must decide between, staying home or going to the dance, and all the comedy that ensues. So the internal and external conflicts don't have to be separate, and you don't only have to choose one. So your main one might be character versus character, and character versus character, and that is your whole storyline like that there. But then you also have a little bit of character versus himself, and then so maybe this one goes for right here, kind of stops for a little bit, then comes back, and then gets resolved at the end. So it's not the whole storyline, but it's a big part of it. And then you could also have character versus society, and maybe that's a part of it as well. And good stories kind of incorporate all three of them in there. So maybe this one kind of here, and then there at the end. So there is a possibility to have all three of you can maybe fit character versus environment in there. This one's kind of hard to do with all these other ones. If it's not the main conflict, okay. So when you're starting to write these, you need to ask yourself the following questions: what kind of conflict do you want to highlight? Which conflict is appropriate for your characters, desires, and actions. So normally your character is going to have a goal. They want something that they need to accomplish, whether that be to survive out in the wilderness, or overturn the government. And so, what's going to be the challenge in the way? And that's what you need to figure out. Okay. And does the conflict offer a difficult struggle for your characters? Meaning, if it's really easy to defeat the nemesis, then why are you bothering telling us? You know, people want to be hooked. People want to be entertained, and they just don't want someone just willy nilly just kind of winning easily. So, so make sure that your opposition is a force to be reckoned with. And so once you figure out all this stuff here, this will help you have a clear idea of where you're going to go for your story and putting the pieces together. All right. So once, so your first thing that you need to do, you need to figure out kind of your idea, and then also your conflict. Okay. And so when you have those, I want you to like kind of write them down and label it idea and then label it conflict, and tell me who is going to be in there. And so, uh, before you start writing your story, you're going to want to diagram your story. And so I'm sure you've all seen the plot diagram. And and so what the diagram will do is it'll give you a clear idea of your story, and how it moves from beginning to end. Because beginnings are kind of easy to get. You kind of know where you're going to end. It's just kind of that middle part that is really kind of tricky, actually. And so I'm going to help you try to get through that middle part, because there's a certain kind of pattern that most stories go through. And so we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. So, okay, so short stories are a little bit different than books, in the fact that the exposition is a little bit shorter in short stories. Normally in novels, the first about 25% is a novel, or is exposition in a novel, but in a short story, it's probably about 10%. Okay, and so our example here of the Three Little Pigs is, the pigs move out of their mother's house, and so what the exposition does, we get introduced to the characters. I won't read the whole thing. The setting, and then it introduces the conflict. And depending on how you write your beginning, that'll depend on when that conflict is introduced. Maybe it's introduced right away. Maybe you introduce the characters first and then the conflict. Okay. Then, and this one's not on here, so make sure you write this down. Right here is the 20. Oh, that's not a straight line. Right here is the 25% line, and this is what we call the no turning back. And what the no turning back is that this is a part of your story where the character has to do, or has to defeat their problem or their opposition. Okay. Um, in the Hunger Games, it's kind of when they start going out into the forest or whatever they do. Actually, Hunger Games does a really good job of following this plot diagram kind of to a T. And so, no turning back at 25%, and then that gets us to the rising action. And what the rising action is everything leading up to your climax. So just kind of what your character does to defeat the problem, and what the opposition does to kind of counter it. And usually about halfway through, there is a twist. Like or the main character thinks everything's going good, you can't be stopped, and then something happens, and it just kind of changes everything. And so after that, you just keep going until you get to the climax. The climax is it's the highlight of your story. It's the payoff. Is what everyone's been waiting to see. So as a character versus a character, they finally interact and they start duking it out or whatever they're doing. It could be a physical, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be emotional. It's just kind of the most intense scene that you as a writer will have in your story. Okay? Next is the falling action. And this, there's no kind of set like how long this has to be. It could be a lot or it could be a little bit. I mean, so there's no limit to like how long this has to be. Maybe everything gets tied up really nicely in the climax. Maybe there's still a lot of questions left over. Okay? And then here is the resolution. I don't know why it's not on there. Sorry. Resolution. And that's just the ending of your story. And go back to the other video about beginnings and endings, because that's going to help you out so much, because writing a beginning for your creative nonfiction was very similar to your short story. Okay? So there's all of that. And then once you're done with your plot diagram, so going back here, I want you to fill in, a plot diagram of your own. So you need to say kind of in short little sentences, what happens. Okay. I also want you to have the 25%, the no turning back point, and then the 50% is a twist. And I say twist, and it doesn't have to be like a huge shocking thing. It could be a little thing as well. Okay. So, once you're done with your plot diagram, I want you guys to briefly summarize what is going on or what your story is going to be about. This would be like a movie trailer or the inside of like a book cover, the jacket part of the book, okay? I mean, it's a one paragraph summary for your idea for a short story. And once you have this, I want you to email this, and your plot diagram, okay? All right. So that is your next assignment. You try to have it done by like Monday or Tuesday, and then we'll talk about characters, because now that you have your idea, you can create a nice 3D character to go along with your story. Okay? All right, and that's what we'll talk about next. So thanks for watching.